George, great to be with you today. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. Tell me a little bit about the origins of Us Against Alzheimer's, how it got started, what the mission is.
So, Kerry, nice to be with you today. Us Against Alzheimer's started in 2010. Three families that have been deeply impacted by Alzheimer's. Uh, a gentleman from a very large Catholic family who's lost 7 out of 11 aunts and uncles. A woman who has been taking care of her husband at home with dementia for 22 years. My own family, which has been affected by now 3 generations of Alzheimer's victims. So this is a patient-led organization that's insisting on greater speed and greater attention and greater passion and greater urgency to try and accelerate cures and treatments for Alzheimer's.
And so back us through, sort of set the stage. What we all know, this is a huge global crisis, and if you could just tell me a little bit about, what is going on in the current state of affairs in this sort of the dementia, Alzheimer's, and why it truly is a catastrophic situation.
Well, we have over 50 million families today around the world that have this disease. They're dying at the rate of 7 million people a year from causes related to Alzheimer's. 10 million new cases a year. Current estimates are 50 million families around the world, 150 million families in 2050. But by that time, 30, 40 million people will have died of this disease. So that's why there's a great impact. Not only that is the cost. This is a long disease, 8 to 10 years, typically symptomatic. The burden on the healthcare system is great. The burden on families is great, both emotional and financial, and indeed physical and health-wise. Families are affected by this disease. So it's a big disease, huge and growing. So the world is beginning to respond, beginning to pay attention, because why? Turns out aging populations are expensive for societies to support. And there are fewer young people to pay the taxes or to provide caregiving for older people. So it's beginning to affect world economies and the whole social structure of families around the world. So it is a big, big problem.
I know in my own family, my father had Alzheimer's, and it was, as you said, a 10-year process, and I couldn't wait to see him get to the other side, because it was truly painful for everyone. So it's important work you're doing. Does Us Against Alzheimer's have a specific mission that sort of has carved out a niche that you would like to discuss?
Well, we set our organization up in 2010 and created an organizational goal of stopping the disease by 2020. That's next year. And by next year, we believe there will be a turning point in this disease, because there will probably be 2 drugs approved by the FDA for treatment of Alzheimer's. This year, there was a drug approved in China, which will be on market by the end of this month to treat Alzheimer's. So we set an organizational goal of 2020. We tried to persuade the domestic policy team and the Obama administration to set that same goal. They decided to set a goal of 2025. So there's a time-based goal to find a means of prevention and effective treatment of Alzheimer's now at the national level of 2025, and then the G7 in 2013 adopted that same goal. So right now there's a global goal of finding a means of prevention and effective treatment by 2025. So there is now a greater sense of urgency and attention, and pace is beginning to pick up.
Now, if someone wants to get involved with Us Against Alzheimer's, at what level can they get in? Besides, certainly they can make a monetary contribution, but is there a way we can volunteer and get involved?
Well, let's face it, monetary contributions are important because we're a relatively small organization having a major impact globally and nationally. So that monetary contributions are important. usagainst-alzheimers.org/donate. With that said, we're finding that there are now in our coalition over 100 Alzheimer's serving organizations. So that in fact in our coalition, if you want to volunteer in any level, in any city or state across the country, we can find a way to plug you into one of the organizations with whom we partner.
Oh, I love that. Would you mind listing 1 or 2 of those organizations?
Well, there are a lot of assisted living facilities around the country. There are a lot of organizations from Alzheimer's Los Angeles and San Diego to Caring Kind in New York City, but Alzheimer's Mississippi. These are organizations that are independent of any other organization focused on their local communities or in their states.
But they can learn more from your website to link through those.
Absolutely. Learn more from usagainst.alzheimers.org.
Oh, fantastic. Now, in terms of, and then in terms of what have been the big stumbling blocks, why is Alzheimer's taking so long? I mean, this has been, we've all been aware of it now, but what's stopping the progress to date?
Well, the brain is the most complex instrument in the entire world. You have as many neurons in your brain as there are stars in the sky. And each of those neurons has 1,000 connections to other neurons. So we're talking about complexity way beyond that of the internet or any particular or instrument of the globe or indeed of the universe. So getting a drug into the brain, difficult because there's a blood-brain barrier that prevents foreign objects from getting into your brain. It protects our brain, right? So getting a drug into your brain to start with is difficult. And then hitting a target, and we don't know precisely what the target is yet, in a way that doesn't affect any other parts of the brain. It's turning out to be a very complex thing.
And I know one of your mantras is brain health, right? It's sort of this whole idea of everything we can do to promote brain health as well.
There's now emerging science that suggests that there are a variety of lifestyle interventions and medical management of other conditions which are driving aggravation and acceleration of dementia. Hypertension in midlife, diabetes drives brain impairments. So we need to change our lifestyle, get good sleep, Mediterranean diet, exercise, social connectedness, stress reduction, a variety of things which we can do during the course of our lives, which is difficult for many people who are stressed in their life, quite frankly, and who do not take attention to aerobics or Mediterranean diets and can't do that. There are food deserts. There are not exercise gyms in low-income population areas. So there are a variety of things that are impediments to those lifestyle interventions. But yes, taking care of your brain during your life actually can prevent, the experts are telling us, up to 1/3 of the cases of dementia.
Yeah, and I mean that's remarkable, and it's important to get that message out. And I also feel that a lot of us don't wake up to the seriousness of this until it does strike our families. And there is this sort of maybe it's politically incorrect to discuss this, but this idea of assisted suicide. I mean, how does that? Have you heard people bringing that up to you? I mean, how do you address that question? I know it's a little, it's a little tricky and thorny.
Well, part of this is language. Assisted suicide means that a third party is assisting you in dying. Quite frankly, what we would like to have is an ability for people, when they're cognitively healthy and competent, identify the circumstances in which they would like to have medicines withdrawn, extraordinary techniques of extending life withdrawn, and even food and water, because that will cause death within roughly 10 days. So how is it that we can enable individuals to make the choice of when they would like to die, under what circumstances? There comes a time in this disease, if you're otherwise got a good heart and lungs, when you will be alive, but you want to be in a vegetative state. You won't be able to communicate. You are lying there and have no cognizance of what's going on. You can't recognize your family members. No one, I think, in their right mind, and when they are of a right mind, would like to live in those circumstances. And so how do we enable people basically to make the choice when they are competent to be able to define with clarity when the circumstances are that they'd like to pass away? And then how do we create the legal instruments, a durable medical power of attorney that you give to someone? Durable meaning that it continues even if you aren't able to make your own decisions, that the person continues to have the ability to withdraw medical interventions that you don't want. So there's now an organization called Compassionate Choices, and they now basically have a checklist of what you can do, and have a conversation with your family, walk through the checklist, do a durable medical power of attorney, and give it to someone that you can have confidence would actually exercise it. Tough for a child to exercise that durable power of attorney for a parent. So it may be a friend or someone else that you trust will actually enforce it. But so there we have an emotional burden to get over, some education about the circumstances under which you ought to be able to make choices when you're competent about the circumstances when you'd like to have medical interventions and maybe even food and water withdrawn.
I think this is a huge issue, so thank you. I appreciate you elaborating on that. Now, George, is there anything that you would like to, that we haven't touched on in this conversation, that you'd want to, really get the message out about Us Against Alzheimer's and about what we can do as individuals?
Well, Us Against Alzheimer's is a small organization that needs monetary contributions. So usagainstalzheimers.org/donate. But I would say ask your doctor about brain health. What can I do today to improve and maintain my brain health for as long as possible? That's an important thing to do. The other thing is to talk to people about what's happening in your family. Too often families try to hide the person in their family with dementia, thinking that they're embarrassing or they're embarrassing themselves, and they want to protect them. It's exactly the wrong thing to do. Get them out and continue to have them socially connected as much as possible with family and with friends. It may be awkward. That's our problem, not the person with dementia. And so we have to understand that we should be talking about this disease. We should tolerate behaviors which seem odd in normal social circumstances, but honor and respect the person with dementia. They are human beings, entitled to our respect, entitled to our love, and we need to talk about this and keep our loved ones socially connected as long as possible.
So, George, that's probably one of the reasons, one element why Alzheimer's has kind of taken, it's been kind of pushed back until now, because people didn't talk about it. They hid it away.
No question that people feel awkward when their loved one begins asking repetitive questions or has some strange behaviors in social circumstances. It is awkward, but so is a wheelchair. So was a wheelchair. And now we've come to think wheelchair is just a normal part of the people living in our society. I get off planes these days and I see a lineup of wheelchairs. 20 years ago, people wouldn't travel if they were disabled and needed a wheelchair. Now we've socialized that. We need to socialize the fact that people have dementia and need to be included in society and in the social discourse of our communities.
Well, fantastic. I think we'll wrap it on that, George. Thank you so much. And it's Us Against Alzheimer's. And again, mention that web address one more time.
Usagainstalzheimers.org. Thank you very
Excellent.
much.
Great to have you here.